As you can see the title, we're going to be talking about Dragon Ball Z Sagas. I feel like a very specific series of events needs to happen in order for you to come across this game and end up enjoying it. For lack of immediate story come-uppings, I'm just going to tell you how I came across this game. It was the late 90s, and I had just found cable. See, I didn't necessarily watch too much cable back then when I was younger. I just did what any normal happy child would do. Play games, ride the bike, whatever. Do all that stuff. Then one day, it was raining. It was raining and I couldn't go outside. So I decided to turn on the TV and go to my favorite cartoon channel, right? I would go to Cartoon Network. And I was entranced by what I was seeing on the screen. I saw this blonde dude fighting this character, and the planet was all on fire, and it was like I was in the middle of the Frieza saga, and I was watching something so incredibly awesome that I was on board from then on. And all I wanted was Dragon Ball Z stuff from then on. From then to the early 2000s, it was just Dragon Ball Z. I didn't play too many games back then when I was a child. I had Spyro. I had all 3 Spyro games. I had Tony Hawk, Pro Skater 1, and then a couple years later I picked up Pro Skater 4. I think I had the Crash games. I had Croc, because it came with the PS1. Yeah, I didn't have too many. I had the Rocket Power game. I'm not too sure what else. We would rent a bunch of games instead from Blockbuster. Perhaps you've heard of that. Blockbuster was the thing that we used to rent movies, and I would use to rent games because we didn't necessarily have a lot of disposable income back then to just pick up games. There's no used game shop to buy games for, like, incredibly low prices for, like, $5 each and stuff like that. No. They were always so expensive and things of that nature. So, I would just rent games from Blockbuster. And during the early 2000s, the late 90s, early 2000s, it was PS1 games. And then sometime around 2002, 2003, maybe even 2001, my memory's not exactly the perfect thing, we picked up a PlayStation 2 for Christmas for me, and I finally got my very first Dragon Ball game. It wasn't this one, though. It wasn't this one. It was Dragon Ball Z Budokai 2, I think. Was it 2, or was it the first one? I need to see when this came out. This is 2000. Okay, so it's probably the first one yet. Yeah, there you go. Budokai 1, alright? This was my technically second PS2 game because, you know, ATV Off-Road Fury 2, the thing was packed with the PS2. It came coupled with the PS2 and all that good stuff, right? So, sometime in the mid-2000s, I was able to pick up these two relatively in close proximity to one another. Did I enjoy this one more? I think I did. I think I enjoyed this one more because it had a storyline that kind of fit with the show. Now, I know a lot of fans of these games don't necessarily like games that just follow the show's storyline. They want new storylines. That's why they love Xenoverse and all that stuff. But for me, I didn't necessarily have access to the whole show. I was watching it on cable. I missed the Saiyan Saga. I missed the first half of the Namek Saga. So I was getting new information when I was playing this game. I was getting new parts of the story added to the backlog and all that stuff. So I loved Budokai. I would play it over and over, especially the story missions. I would collect all the capsules, because you would collect capsules to get attacks and transformations and things of that nature. I ended up getting everything for everybody, because it was like one of the only games I had. And then, of course, I did the same thing for Budokai 2. Now, as I've grown up, I appreciate Budokai 2 far more than this one. because I already know the story at the back of my hand, so I kind of don't necessarily have too much drive to come back to this other than for nostalgic purposes, because there are some battles in the story mode that kind of make you wonder. They're kind of difficult compared to this one, except for a couple in this one that are kind of difficult. But in this one, there's two that I can think of. The Goku versus Frieza fight as Super Saiyan Goku, and the Gohan versus Cell fight, because this only goes up to Cell, as you could see. Those two were the main things, and I also really loved this one bonus survival mode. When you collected the Dragon Balls, which would be randomly given to you throughout the story mode as you did that, you could unlock the Hercule Survival Mode, which is basically an alternate retelling of the Cell games where Hercule would show up, Mr. Satan, he would show up, and he would beat all of the Sea Fighters, ending with beating up Cell, and there was various conditions, like, say, during the fight with Android 16, after he fought that his attack would be halved because he was punching through all that hard armor from Android 16. So when you fought Trunks, your attack was halved. And then when you fought Vegeta, your HP didn't heal, so you had to fight Vegeta with and that's kind of how it worked. There's various conditions that you had to get added onto your character, and you had to survive and beat through everybody in a single setting. There's no save points, no rest points. If you lost, you had to start all over again. I ended up really loving that mode. I really love that mode compared to there was a lot of good what-if modes as well. There's a what-if story in the various 3 sagas. In the Saiyan saga, there's a what-if story where you play as Vegeta, where he actually wins, and he turns Super Saiyan after defeating Goku and getting all mad about that. During the Frieza saga, I can't necessarily remember what the what-if story for that is. I guess it wasn't really that important. The what-if story for Cell, though, is very important. It is so very, very memorable. You basically play as Cell as he absorbs Android 17, and he turns into semi-perfect Cell. He defeats Android 18, but then Krillin gets in the way of him absorbing Android 18. Then Krillin falls into Cell's tail, and Cell absorbs Krillin and turns into Cellin! Then Yamcha and Tien show up, and they're like, oh, you're gonna pay for absorbing Krillin. And then they fight him, and Yamcha actually gives Cell trouble. And it was amazing. It is incredibly memorable. And then as Cellin is about to destroy Yamcha, he looks up at the sky and sees Tien about to kill him with his Kiko-Ho. And that would be the start of Cell's grudge against Tien. It was amazing. I loved it. I loved it. Ah, man, I haven't played this game in 20 years, and not 20 years, more like 15 years. I haven't played this game in like 15 years, and I remember it. I remember everything about it. Same for this. I've played this one a lot recently, probably about 10 years ago. The story mode is more like a video game board. I'm not going to go into all of these things. I'm already 8 minutes in. I could go for hours and hours and hours about these games, so I need to stop. But I just wanted to let you know where I started. I started here. And then, a couple of years later, this comes out. Now, it wasn't my birthday, and it wasn't Christmas. So, I wasn't getting this added to my collection anytime soon. But, it was at Blockbuster. So, I picked it up at Blockbuster to play it, and it was different. It was very different compared to the 2 fighting games that I had played previously, right? So, was I happy about it? Well, I hadn't played too many games. The ones that I've mentioned were basically all that I played. I played a couple more things that I rented from Blockbuster on the PS1, of course, like the Rugrats games. There's a Looney Tunes game I played. Whatever Crash game that I didn't have, I rented that. There wasn't too many things. I was playing mostly platformers and things of that nature. This was like my first beat-em-up that I played. Like, it was my first actual beat-em-up. And not a fighting game. It wasn't a platformer. It was a downright beat-em-up. So, I guess, from my limited experience in playing video games, this was my first one. So I guess I ended up really liking it at the time. I would play it non-stop every day. I would just play Sagas. Then I would get stuck. I would get stuck on the final mission in the story where you had to fight as Teen Gohan, or as some people call him, Cell Games Gohan, since he's only like 11 or 12 years old, so he's not necessarily a teenager at this point. But we call him Teen Gohan. The games call him Teen Gohan, so that's what I'm just going to call him. Teen Gohan fighting Perfect Cell, and you have to get him to go not only Super Saiyan, but you have to go Super Saiyan 2. And the thing is that Cell is very brutal in his attacks, and I wasn't necessarily great at fighting and countering and all that stuff. So whenever I got going to finally turn Super Saiyan, his ki would keep dropping to below, and he would keep falling out of the form before I was able to hit Super Saiyan 2. Because you had to keep fighting to build up your ki. But once you hit Super Saiyan, you could not just, like, charge and power up to build up your ki to hit Super Saiyan 2. No. You gained ki as a Super Saiyan by punching the bad guy a lot of times, and countering and doing all sorts of that crap. And that would be how you built up your ki to hit Super Saiyan 2, because it would constantly drop as you're getting hit, it would constantly drop as you're not attacking, so you just had to be very aggressive. And I just wasn't able to do it. I kept getting countered by Cell, and the ki kept dropping. I wasn't able to hit the Super Saiyan 2. And eventually I was able to do it. I was able to hit Super Saiyan, because you could only damage Cell in a Super Saiyan 2 form in for that story mission. You could only damage him in a Super Saiyan 2 form. So that's what I did. I hit Super Saiyan 2, and I finally managed to beat him. I finally did it, right? I finally did it! And it was very rewarding. It was very rewarding. Then you unlock the Pendulum Room, and I really loved this mode. Basically, this is like that co-op game that I never played co-op, because I like playing by myself. But the co-op in this game is basically, during each story mission, there is a second player with a second character that you could play as. For example, during the first story mission, it's the Raditz fight. You start as Goku for player 1, but player 2 would be Piccolo. So if the player 2 plugged in their controller, they would be playing as Piccolo. And I was like, well, what if I wanted to play as Piccolo instead of playing as Goku as player 1, right? So now you could. Now you could pick any character that was playable in the story, plus 5 new characters that were never playable in the story. Krillin, Tien, Yamcha, Bardock, and Broly. Legendary Super Saiyan Broly. Neither Bardock nor Broly have any story missions in the main game. They're just bonus characters. Which is kind of weird to me, because the Future Trunks storyline is in the main story, but not Bardock. Whatever. So, in the Pendulum Room, it's basically hard mode. Not necessarily for the random mooks that you can punch and beat up, but for the bosses, it's hard mode. So, if you're not playing as a character that could transform, then all of the damage that you're going to deal is minuscule. It's so minuscule that it would take you a very, very long time to defeat the enemy. And the enemies are very aggressive. They would spam their main attack. Like Vegeta would spam Gallic Gun over and over and over and over, and it was very annoying. But eventually, if you played as a character that couldn't transform, if you were tenacious enough, you would eventually win. It stopped being fun. But if I was playing as Broly, then it was really, really fun. Because he's constantly transformed. He's always in legendary Super Saiyan form, and he would destroy anything and everybody. If the bosses, nobody stood a chance against him. So he was very rewarding to play as. He was very fun to play as, but I wanted to play as Tien and Yamcha. So I kept picking Yamcha and Tien, and they kept getting their asses kicked at the bosses fights because they couldn't deal any damage, and it's just, boy. There's a lot wrong with this game, especially if you try to play it now. If you play it now, after all of these have come out, this had come out long before. This, and this. I have Super Dragon Ball Z somewhere, I just don't have it available to show you, I guess. But all of those games, with the possible exception of this one here, I would consider better than Sagas. And of course, I would consider the bulk, if not all, well no, Battle of Z. I would consider Sagas better than Battle of Z. This is just my opinion. I would consider Battle of Z worse than Sagas. And I would consider Ultimate Tenkaichi worse than Sagas. So the PS3 era, I would say Burst Limit, the two Raging Blast games, and maybe Xenoverse. They're better than Sagas, but I would say Sagas is better than Ultimate Tenkaichi and Battle of Z. Those two games are garbage. They're garbage. They're crap. I would consider them absolute garbage. And you want to know why? It's probably because of my disdain for DLC and exclusive DLCs at the same time. For example, with Battle of Z, I don't have it because I don't have it to show you because I refuse to buy it. But with Battle of Z, they had both GameStop and Best Buy having an exclusive character download code that you could get if you bought the game from that respective store. And it's like, if you bought it from GameStop, you don't need to buy it from Best Buy. But if you bought it from GameStop, you don't get the exclusive character that you can play as for Best Buy. So if you wanted a complete roster, you would have to buy them from both stores! And maybe just return the one that you bought from Best Buy after you used the voucher code. I guess. Whatever. But I didn't do that because I hate practices like that. I hate exclusive DLCs. I honestly hate DLC, period, but I hate exclusive DLCs, especially. Exclusive DLCs where you have to buy it from a certain location to get the DLC for that, whatever, especially when it comes to playable characters in either fighting games, roster completions, RPG, whatever. I hate it. I hate it. That's why, on principle, I did not get Battle of Z. Now I'm rambling. This is going to be a rambling video. I wanted to just talk about this, but, you know, I can't just talk about this. I end up rambling. But that was my journey reaching to Sagas. So, with my limited experience in playing games, I ended up enjoying Sagas very much. When I played it recently, I realized why everybody hates it. Every character, essentially, with the possible exception of one of them, has the exact same moveset. When you fight, their animations are the exact same. When they use their special attack, it's the exact same attack, they just shout out a different name. When you transform, it's the same thing. It's just reskins. They're all just reskins. And it starts to dawn on you how lazy this game was put together. Though there is one solace, just one good thing about this game that no other game since has done justice to, and that is the character of Future Gohan. If you know who Future Gohan is, for those of you who don't know, Future Gohan is a character that is shown in the Android Saga that comes after the Frieza Saga. At the start of the Android Saga, a character called Trunks shows up and kills Frieza before the eyes of Vegeta and the others, and they're all like, "Who are you?" And then Goku shows up, and then Trunks tells Goku that he is from 20 years in the future, and that he was raised and trained by Gohan, the only surviving Z fighter. Everybody else was killed by the androids, and then Gohan eventually died 20 years later. And then Trunks comes back in time to prevent all that nightmare from happening, to tell everybody the news about the androids so that they could prepare and not die. And then Trunks says he would come back to help them out against the androids anyways. I don't know why he left in the first place. He could have just stayed, but whatever, you know. So, Future Gohan was the character who survived when everybody else died. And he eventually obtained the Super Saiyan transformation like his father. And then when he fought the androids, he lost an arm in battle. So, while he was training Trunks, he had just one arm. The one-armed Gohan character is playable in this game. One arm. His moveset is slightly modified compared to all of the other characters, in that he could punch and kick with one arm. So everybody else has the same moveset. Gohan is the only one with a different one, because he only has one arm to fight with. And I found that to be interesting. Because why would this game, why would this one, Atari here, yeah, why would Sagas be the only one out of every game since that has released a Future Gohan playable character? Why is it this is the only one that showed a one-arm Gohan? Now, I could pull out Raging Blast 1 and 2, or technically just Raging Blast 2 that has feature Gohan playable, but I don't want to take that one out. I'll just take the only PS2 era game that had a feature Gohan as well. Tenkaichi 3 here. The best game here? Maybe? No. I would say this one has the best gameplay. It's the best fighting game of the Dragon Ball Z games of the PS2 era, in my opinion. Some people say Super Dragon Ball Z is better, but I would argue that Super Dragon Ball Z is just not as good in regards to combo chains and all that cool stuff and all that cool Dragon Ball Z style action. This is the one that you want. Atari for all of them, you know. Atari. Surprisingly, no Atari for this one. But there's Atari for this one. Is there an Atari on Ultimate Battles? No. Not that I can see. Infographics. Right here. Info Games. There's that one for the PS1 era game. Info Games. And it's also on the first Budokai. Info Games. I don't know if Info Games will be bought out by Atari. That's actually something I would like to look up real quick. Holy shit, wow. Okay, so Atari actually was the creator of all these games, technically. Because Infogrames, which would make the PS1 era games and the first PS2 era game, Infogrames right there, right? These guys would be bought by Atari in 2003. I think it says here, 2003. Let me look up exactly when. But they would buy out this company. So, technically, when you see Atari on all these games since, it's technically the Infogrames team, but they've been bought out by Atari. That's why you see Atari for. That's actually pretty cool to know. That's actually pretty cool to know. I know I'm rambling. But, so, back to Future Gohan. Future Gohan is playable in Tenkaichi 3, and he's also playable in Raging Blast 2 on the PlayStation 3, and he's also, I believe, playable in Xenoverse 2. Ignoring Xenoverse 2 for the moment, and ignoring Raging Blast, since Raging Blast is essentially Tenkaichi 3 with less characters and less substantive combat system. So, with Tenkaichi 3, Future Gohan is playable, and he has 2 arms. There's no one-armed version. And same with Raging Blast 2, 2 arms, no one-armed version. Same thing with Xenoverse 2. 2 arms, no one-armed version. There has never been a one-armed version playable character of Gohan since Sagas. So if you're a stickler for that, if you've ever wanted to play as one-armed Gohan, this is the only game that has ever been released that has a playable version of Gohan with one arm. If you're not interested in that, then there's probably no other reason to play this game. But I'm going to try to defend it. I'm going to try to defend it within the next few minutes. You see, this being my first beat-em-up style game, I've played plenty of beat-em-up games since. Alright, so I have plenty of Dynasty Warriors games somewhere. I just don't feel like looking for them. This one was the closest, so we'll use this as our visual aid. This is Dynasty Warriors Gundam 3. This is a Muso type of game. Basically means you play as one overpowered character against many characters that you could beat up with cool move sets and awesome explosions and things of that nature, right? And I've played plenty of these games since I played Sagas. I love the Muso series, man. I've played One Piece Pirate Warriors 2, 3, I played Dynasty Warriors 6, 7, 8, 8XL, Gundam 3, I want to play Gundam 2 and 1 eventually. There's a lot of Muso. Sengo Basara, I played that one. There's a lot of Muso type of games. With the Muso type, this formula seems to work, particularly in places like Japan where they're originating. There's a market for that type of gameplay, and it's very satisfying. It's very fun, where you pit one character against hundreds and you're pounding away at them. And when I came back to this, I was reminded of a Muso game, right? And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be amazing to have a Dragon Ball Muso game if Atari and Bandai teamed up to make or Atari and Koei, more likely, teamed up to make a Musou game with the Dragon Ball IP, where you pit one character against hundreds of mooks. And this formula that they started in Sagas could be that formula you use for your story mode or campaign mode, because the enemies that you fight in this, the beat 'em up, for example, in the first fight with Raditz, you fight various types of Cybermen. The green Cybermen fire acid. The orange Cybermen are like ranged characters. There's purple Cybermen that are like poisonous or something. There's Hulk out Cybermen, I think they're blue. They would turn big, 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 and they're like hulking out and punching. There's red Cybermen that do something interesting. Each colored Cyberman is like a different type of character, enemy that you could fight throughout the levels. And also, during the Namek levels, you could fight members of the Frieza forces, nameless goons that do different types of things. That would fire from their Frieza blasters. That would fight you with normal combat modes and all that stuff. There's a slight variety that makes it slightly entertaining to beat them up. And I thought to myself, you could use those types of characters, but like make them hundreds and hundreds and pit them in like a whole Musou style combat style, and I feel like it would work really, really well. This feels like a prototype to a Musou type of game that never happened. This feels like an unfinished game to an amazing title like this. I don't know if Dynasty Warriors 4 came out around the times of Sagas. I'm going to have to check that before I continue. Okay, I'm back from looking that up. Dynasty Warriors 4, which many people really like, released on the PlayStation 2 in 2003. It's a very satisfying beat-em-up game. I highly recommend it. Though I would argue that Dynasty Warriors 8 is superior on almost every single level, with the possible exception of story. And Sagas released in 2005. So the formula existed at the time of this game's release. I don't know if Atari and the Infogrames' branch of Atari knew of those types of games, or knew that they were wanting to try to make something like that. I don't know. But I feel like they could have made that instead of this. They could have made a Dynasty Warriors 4 style game with the backdrop of Dragon Ball Z, and it would have kickstarted a Musou series of Dragon Ball games that would have been absolutely incredible. I don't know about you, but I kind of got sick of the typical fighting games. Like, Tekken G3 is amazing for its massive roster. You can play Dragon Ball GT characters, you can play your OG Dragon Ball characters. But when I say OG Dragon Ball, I have to say that as a differentiation. I have to say it as a differentiation mainly because of one thing. See, we have two denotations for the Western audiences, in particular in regards to the anime and the manga. We have a thing called Dragon Ball, no Z, in the red covers, and then you have a thing called Dragon Ball Z. And it might confuse some audiences, like, what comes first? Well, if you have eyes and can see, when you look at, say, this picture, you see this character here, he's named Goku, right? And he seems to be like an adult. Well, when you look at this, you can see this, his name is Goku, and he seems to be a kid, so I'm guessing here. I'm just being a guessing here, but maybe this comes first. Maybe this comes first. So, you would play the OG Dragon Ball. That's what I would say. We would try to differentiate, because everybody knows Dragon Ball Z. Nobody freaking watches Dragon Ball. And I would argue that this is the better story. So, when I say OG Dragon Ball, I mean the earlier series, and it's not a prequel. All right, Toriyama drew these in the 80s. He did this in the 90s. This is 80s. Okay, that's the denotation there. So there's OG Dragon Ball characters in here, such as Kid Goku. Yamcha has his bandit outfit from the Pilaf Saga. Emperor Pilaf is in this. General Blue, King Piccolo, Nam from the 21st Tournament, Android 8. There's so many amazing and excellent characters that are playable in this game, and they were very satisfying to use. They're very satisfying. And also, I would have loved a Tenkaichi 4 released for the PlayStation 3 with every single character from this game, but you added even more. So let's say you added Colonel Silver, the pirate robot, Giran, Bacterian, oh man, maybe even King Choppa. You could add all sorts of characters. Kid Krillin. You could add so many OG Dragon Ball characters in a potential Tenkaichi format. But I'm rambling. These are rambling videos. That's why they're long. I have I have a general topic, but in these rambling videos, I am allowed to go off on tangents on other things. I'm allowed to go on tangents about other things. But what I was trying to get at before I went off on my said tangent is that I got tired of the formula of fighting games with Dragon Ball. I love the IP. But I got absolutely sick of the formula of just, here's a fighting game. Here's a slightly better fighting game. Here's a refined, perfect fighting game that you would play every friggin' day until you burned out the disc. Here's a different fighting game that might be worse than the other two that just came out. It might be better than the first Budokai, but it's not as good as the second and third Budokais, right? Then there's this one here. This is better than the first Tenkaichi. Tenkaichi 2 refined the combat system, and Tenkaichi 3 perfected it, right? And then we have a return to form of the Budokai formula, Infinite World. Most people forget this one exists because this one came out, I believe, after Burst Limit on the PlayStation 3. This released in, I believe, 2009, 2010 on the PlayStation 2 only. Only the PS2. And it's essentially the perfected Budokai engine. It is the last one to use the Budokai style engine. It contains some GT characters. It contains more characters, essentially just more characters. The story mode kind of is a callback to Budokai 2. You got sprites that are basically like the Budokai 2 sprites. The combat is like Budokai 3, but refined, perfected. Like, this was the definitive, but by this point I was experiencing major fighting game exhaustion. I was experiencing fighting game exhaustion, particularly of the same formula from Infinite World, right? So I would come back to this one, and I would say that this is a breath of fresh air, and I wish it was better. I wish it was like this, and I would have loved it. And I'm still pining. I'm still pipe dreaming for that potential game, for that future game. If anybody ever watches this and hears my idea, take it. Please take this idea and make the Musou Dragon Ball crossover of the century. Make it happen! Now somebody recommended I say this at the end. These games are on discs, right? And they're pretty old. Some of them are reaching 20 years old now. This one miraculously is spotless, I guess because nobody frickin' played it. But, if I looked over here to, say, Budokai 3, if I pulled out Budokai 3 here, and I popped out the disc, it would be pretty banged up. It would be banged up pretty bad. It'd be cloudy, the disc would be clouded. And I just have to say, you have to be careful with these discs. You have to be kind to them. Treat them like you would a very valuable piece of jewelry. Because if you scratch the disc, you mess up the data. And when you mess up the data, the next person that plays the game can't enjoy them. And we like enjoying them. We do. So if you ever sell your games, if you ever sell them, please make sure you're selling a game that works. Don't try to be coy and be like, oh, this game's scratched. Well, maybe I could just sneakily sell it and make some money off of it, right? And then maybe I could just sell it. It doesn't work for me anymore, but I'll just sell it. Maybe I can make some money off of it instead of throwing it out. If you think like that, if you think so nefariously like that, and then the next person that purchases your scratched and broken game ends up finding that it doesn't work because you thought you could make a couple cents off of something that doesn't work for you, don't do it.